Hey everybody, welcome to the pre-show for Monster Monday for October 18th, 2021. I am DM Galabond, and the music that you are hearing is from Sirenscape. More specifically, this is a sound set called Brindletown, and just some background music for a town environment in Sirenscape. Go check them out over at sirenscape.com. It's a really cool music app and actually sound app. It's got all kinds of environmental sounds as well for your tabletop RPGs. They've got settings, fantasy settings, they've got sci-fi settings, all that kind of stuff. And they allow you to use them in your live streams and your YouTube videos as well. So that's why we're putting them here. Also, I want to remind you to go check out Mo over at the Tabletop Bellhop. Mo is the OG when it comes to all things tabletop games, card games, board games, party games, tabletop RPGs, you name it. If you can play it on a tabletop, then Mo has all kinds of information about it. Links where you can buy the games, see reviews of the games, find out industry news about what's coming up, keep up with game developers, and a whole galaxy of people that are making all kinds of content around tabletop games. Check it out, tabletopbellhop.com. Welcome there, viewers. Hey, Dorsif here. Glad you could join us tonight. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and turn this music down a little bit. Keep it just at the edge of hearing in the background. Alright, welcome everybody to Monster Monday. Tonight is October 18th, 2021. I am your host, DM Galabond, and tonight on Monster Monday, we are going to be looking at a monster that appears in the D&D Monster Manual, but that's not where it originated. That's right, we are looking at prehistoric real-world monstrosities that are in D&D, armored dinosaurs. It's not just a single particular dinosaur, but we're going to look at the range of armored dinosaurs, and we're going to look at how D&D has sort of created fantasy versions of at least one or two of these, gives us a clue of some sort of homebrew modifications you can make to dinosaurs in a world maybe that is a magical world, but sort of a prehistoric world, or one of these sort of cultures collide worlds where you might have prehistoric creatures and more of like a high fantasy civilizations that would come into contact. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. armored dinosaurs, obviously, they originate in the fossil record. People have been finding bones of these ancient creatures for a long time. And, I've never read this anywhere, but I have to believe that, at some point, some, super early civilization, people started finding some of these bones, maybe in areas where there had been fires or something like that, and maybe they found some of these bones or some of these teeth that were scorched. And, I want to say that probably is one of the ways that they developed the legends of dragons, these huge fire-breathing creatures. And it's like, big bone, big teeth, and it's been burned. It probably breathed fire. So it's that might be in fact where some of the people came up with that. But as paleontology became a science and more dinosaur species were discovered, among the most interesting of all those ancient creatures are the armored herbivores like Ankylosaurus, Stegosaurus, and Triceratops. Actually, Stegosaurus, as it turns out, it's not an actual armored dinosaur, so it's not going to appear here. But going into it, I was kind of thinking, and then I realized that the people at D&D have actually done their homework when it comes to some of these dinosaurs. All right, so in the D&D game, the very first time we see dinosaurs is in a setting called Hollow World. And Hollow World it originates in the days of Basic D&D. So before First Edition, before AD&D came around, Hollow World was around. And it is a setting that seems like it was inspired by great early sci-fi writers like Jules Verne. Jules Verne had a novel called Journey to the Center of the Earth, where he sort of theorized drilling down through the core of the Earth and then finding a hollow place inside that had a sun suspended or a star suspended in the middle, and then kind of on the inside of the crust of the Earth, there was a whole civilization that was populated with all kinds of cavemen and prehistoric creatures as well as other things. So Hollow World really seems to have taken that idea and put it into play in a D&D setting. All right, so we're going to take a look at some of these dinosaurs, and we have images of some of the various different types of armored dinosaurs that have appeared in D&D over the years. This one right here is from the Monstrous Compendium Forgotten Realms Appendix from 2nd edition, and it is the Styracosaurus, which it kind of looks a little bit like the Triceratops, but it has a lot more horns on its head, and a bigger arrangement, and that armor plate is not quite as big. So we're going to look at descriptions starting in the Basic Edition and moving forward. So from the Basic Edition, Triceratops is an armored herbivorous dinosaur, walks about on 4 legs, has as much the same temperament as an elephant. Triceratops is about 30 feet long and weighs 10 to 12 tons. A collar-like armor plate grows from its head to protect its neck, and its weapons include a short horn growing from its snout and 2 long horns growing above its eyes. And then in 1st edition, it talks about Ankylosaurus. And this armadillo-like ornithischian weighs 4 to 5 tons, and most of that weight being his armor plating, side spines, and great knobbed tail. And then in 2nd edition, we run into the Styracosaurus, an aggressive plant eater. Styracosaurus charges at anything threatening. The bony plate gives the head an area an AC of 2, and there's a 50% chance that anything attempting to bite its rear portions is stabbed by one or more of the sharp frills of the head plate. So you've got that particular dinosaur in 2nd edition. Well, now we're going to come and we're going to look a little bit at the lore of dinosaurs. And the image we see here is from the 3rd edition D&D, and it is one of the fantastical dinosaurs called the Bloodstriker. So we'll take a little bit of a look at what the lore of armored dinosaurs is, starting with 5th edition and working backwards. So Triceratops, with his great horns and formidable speed, Triceratops gores and tramples would-be predators to death. Now, one of the things, I looked through all of the 4th edition monster resource books that I own, and I didn't find any dinosaurs in 4th edition. Now, they might have been published in some adventures, which I don't have, or maybe in some of the core source rule books that I don't have, but among my collection, I couldn't find anything about dinosaurs at all in 4th edition. So I had to go back to 3rd edition. Ankylosaurus, although it's slow to action once this dinosaur views another creature as an enemy, it fights until either it or its attacker is dead. And in battle, it stands put, swinging its tail at any creature that comes within reach. And that's from the 3rd edition. And then this Bloodstriker, also from 3rd edition, has very curious lore. Those that successfully attack are sprayed by the dinosaur's caustic blood, providing further dissuasion. In addition, the creature has an unusual attack whereby it squirts its acidic blood from its eyes. It usually uses the blood squirt as a defensive measure when confronted by persistent foes. So, this is, again, kind of a fantastical version of a dinosaur. Now, in the real world, there are some reptiles, spitting cobras, and some beetles and stuff that will lob acid at enemies, as a defensive measure. But I'm not a paleontologist. I don't know if there's ever been any suggestion that any dinosaurs did that. This sounds like something that they created, especially when they call it a Bloodstriker dinosaur. It sounds like something that they cooked up in the Wizards of the Coast workshop. But again, giving a dinosaur some kind of fantastical attack is a really interesting way of reskinning a dinosaur and making a dinosaur something unique in your setting, especially if you're going to put that in a high fantasy world that you might have for your game. And dinosaurs are beasts, and this image here is from AD&D, from the Monster Manual 2, and it's something called the Kentrosaurus. Now, I don't know if the Kentrosaurus is an actual dinosaur or if it's one that they made up. I mean, it kind of sounds like, hey, well, there's that guy Kent. He's kind of crusty and prickly. Oh, we'll just call the dinosaur Kentrosaurus. So I don't know. And in D&D 5th edition, dinosaurs are beasts. So they're non-humanoid creatures, natural part of the fantasy ecology. Some of them have magical powers. Most are unintelligent and lack any society or language. And dinosaurs, by and large, fall into that. Dinosaurs always have a very low intelligence, and they have a very predictable and very innate sort of tactic when they are fighting. And another curiosity is that, and it may be true in the fossil record as well as in D&D, but all the armored dinosaurs I could find are herbivores. So they all eat plants, and their armor is all defensive in nature. So to keep them from falling prey to the meat eaters or the carnivore dinosaurs, the predators. All right, so we're going to take a look at the mechanical features of dinosaurs. We'll go ahead and move over to our web page here, and we will talk about these starting back in first edition or basic edition and moving forward. So the first one we come to is the Triceratops from the Rules Cyclopedia. It's a 20 hit die monster, moves 30 feet in round in combat or 90 feet out of combat. 1d8 for the snout horn, and then 2d8 for each of the main horns. Saves as a 10th level fighter, and it's a prehistoric animal, and it's aggressive and dangerous and usually attacks on sight. And it will charge for double damage on the first attack and on any attack thereafter when it is more than 20 yards away from its enemy. So, and then they also suggest in some cases that the four-legged herbivorous dinosaurs might be, kind of in a nod to the Flintstones, might be somehow domesticated and used either as mounts or as beasts of burden that could carry cargo or pull a wagon or something like that. That's another theme that comes up with dinosaurs in D&D. Then in the Basic Edition Creature Catalog, we have the Ankylosaurus. The Ankylosaurus has an armor class of 0. Now we'll compare that with the armor class of 4 for the Triceratops. Ankylosaurus has an armor class of 0, but only 7 hit die, moves 20 feet per round in combat, and it attacks with a tail for 2d6 damage. Saves as a 4th level fighter, and it has a morale of 6. So that means that it's gonna fight. It's gonna fight to a certain extent, but then based on its morale, if it fails, it's gonna try to probably find a way to get out of there. At least in this edition. All right, now we move on to AD&D to first edition. And again, we have armor class 0, 9 hit dice, it's a large creature 15 feet long. And now, by the time they got to first edition, instead of giving it sort of a moderate morale, they are telling us here that it will go ahead and it will keep fighting until it or its attacker is dead. And then also in first edition, in fact in the same monster manual, we see a variation on the Ankylosaurus. Now the Ankylosaurus is that one that you think of that sort of, like it said, sort of looks like an armadillo with the armor shell and has sort of the spikes around the edge, but then it has that big bone club at the end of its tail. Well, the Paleoscincus has more like a flail at the end of its tail. It's got spikes at the end of its tail that it uses to attack. It has an armor class of -3, same number of hit dice, 1 attack, 2d6, but it's piercing damage instead of bludgeoning damage. And it's kind of a walking dreadnought. Heavy plated skin, sharp side spines, and spiked tail makes it nearly invulnerable to attack. Now, of course, one of the things in a campaign where you have maybe a clash of cultures and you have dinosaurs alongside sort of fantasy environments, you might have people sent out to hunt dinosaurs and armored dinosaurs for this armor plating. In some cases, something like the armor plating of a creature like this might be too big and too heavy to make armor for a person. But perhaps if you have a siege engine or something like that, you might use the armor off of a armored dinosaur to protect that. And, depending on what kind of game you're running, if that sort of thing is something that falls to low-level adventurers, hey, the king is trying to build 5 new siege engines and needs armor plating from some Paleoscincus for it. Go out and hunt a few and bring us back those big shells, and we'll pay you for them. So that could be a way to use them in a campaign. Then we have the Styracosaurus, and this is the one that looks like the Triceratops, except it has a lot more horns. It tends to charge at anything that appears threatening. Bony plate gives a head area armor class of 2, 50% chance anything attempting to bite was stabbed by one or more sharp frills, and each of those inflicts 1d6 points of damage. And 1d3 of those frills are likely to hit an enemy. And if it charges, it tramples smaller creatures and does 2d8 damage. And again, it's a large creature, 18 feet long, with 10 hit dice and an armor class of 2 in the head and 4 everywhere else. Alright, and then we get to everybody's favorite Triceratops. Again, it's got an armor class of 2. In this edition, it's got an armor class of 2 and the head, 6 everywhere else. 16 hit dice, 24 feet long. It's the largest of its type and by far the most aggressive. Beaked herbivore is a plains dweller. Huge front plate of bone from which project 2 great horns, while a somewhat shorter horn juts from its nose. The body is not armored and thus armor class 6. And smaller creatures are trampled for 2d12 points of damage. Alright, now we go to the Monster Manual 2 from AD&D, and this is where we run into the Kentrosaurus. And the Kentrosaurus is an 11 hit die monster, armor class 2 and 6. Armor class 2 for the tail, 6 elsewhere. It's 16 feet long for the body and an additional 6 foot long tail. Dinosaur appears to be a cross between a Stegosaur and a Centaurus. Spine area protected by bony back plates from neck to hip sockets, and behind this, sharp backward pointing spikes run to the tip of the tail. And it turns its tail towards enemies. Creatures attacking its rear third have a 25% chance of suffering an attack resulting in 1d8 damage, and 80% likely it will defend armor class 2. And it's also a dinosaur that would appear in a jungle setting. Okay, then we move on to 2nd edition, where we have our Ankylosaurus and our Triceratops. So the Ankylosaurus keeps its armor class of 0. Triceratops keeps its armor class of 2 and 6. The Ankylosaurus is a huge creature, 15 feet long, and the Triceratops is also huge at 24 feet long. And and then under the Ankylosaurus, it makes reference to, now this time they call it the Paleoscincus, as opposed to the Paleoscincus. All right, same thing. All right. Paleoscincus has better armor plating and a spiked rather than club-like tail. And then the Triceratops is by far the most aggressive beaked herbivore. Now, one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning, that when I was going into this, I was thinking, oh, okay, well, they'll have Stegosaurus as one of the armored dinosaurs, because it's kind of the one that you always see pictured that has those sails or plates on its back. But it reminded me here, and when it did, I remembered reading about this when I was in school, that those plates that are on its back are not armor, but they are there to help the animal absorb and dissipate heat. So one of the things that gave early researchers the idea that dinosaurs were cold-blooded is the fact that it had these large surface area plates that could absorb sunlight and then reflect heat like a radiator on a car to dissipate heat from the animal. Might give you a clue that it was cold-blooded. So that is where that's why that doesn't appear as an armored dinosaur in D&D. All right. Then also in second edition, we get to the Forgotten Realm Appendix, and this is where we find our Kentrosaurus. Again, it's got that armor class 2/6, 11 hit dice, and it's a huge creature, 16 feet long. Alright, now we go on into third edition where we find the Triceratops. And Triceratops is a 16d8 monster plus 124 hit points. So now we're starting to finally get dinosaurs that feel like they have the right number of hit points. Because in the early editions, it feels like the dinosaurs don't really have enough hit points. The one thing that you want with a dinosaur is it ought to be a big bucket of hit points, and it ought to be able to fight against your party a long time before it finally drops, because it's just so darn big. So Triceratops has an armor class of 18. Its gore attack is a gore at plus 20 for melee, 2d8 plus 15 damage, and it's a CR9 monster. So it's a pretty good mid-level monster to throw at a party that is not just starting out, but that's got a few adventures under their belt. Then in the Monster Manual 2 from 3rd edition, we have the Ankylosaurus. It's got an armor class of 22. Does the tail slap, plus 13 attack, 2d6 plus 13 damage, tramples for 2d12 plus 13. And notice it has a strength of 29 because it's lugging around all of that armor. And it is a challenge rating 7. So they definitely make the dinosaurs extremely strong creatures in D&D. And then from the Monster Manual 3 in 3rd edition, we get the Bloodstriker Dinosaur. It's a large animal. It has 94 hit points, armor class of 19, and it burrows as well as being able to walk or run across the ground. It's a CR6 monster, and they feed on vegetation and larger insects, often burrowing to hide from both predators and prey. It's about 14 feet long and weighs about 3,000 pounds, so it's relatively light when it comes, to talking about dinosaurs. It's about 1.5 tons. It's got those thick spiked plates cover its body, providing both excellent natural armor and protective spikes apt to damage any creature or um, adventurous enough to attack it. Those successfully attack are sprayed by the caustic blood. And every 1d4 rounds, Bloodstriker can project a 30-foot line of its acid blood as a standard action. And then spiked skin. The skin bristles with defensive spikes. And so that's kind of the one fantastical version of a dinosaur that we see in the various different editions of D&D. All the rest of them are kind of mundane. Well, I take that back. It's the only armored dinosaur we see. In the Tomb of Annihilation in 5th edition, there is a named Tyrannosaurus Rex that has a quality that makes it kind of almost like a blink dog, where it can do short teleportation around the battlefield. And if you think about something as big and as powerful as a T-Rex being able to teleport short distances and do it kind of just as a natural predator, yeah, that makes the fight against that guy really, really interesting. I've had to fight that guy as a player in that game, and it is not a fun experience, because it's hard to get to any point on the battlefield where you are both within range to do something to it, and also out of range of its ability to reach you very quickly. Ankylosaurus in 5th edition. So it's got an armor class 15, 68 hit points. It's a CR3 monster. And again, it's got that thick plating and the heavy club-like tail. And then finally we have the Triceratops, armor class 13, 95 hit points. And it does the trampling charge. It's a CR5 monster. And it will, if you fail a strength save, the trampling charge will knock you prone, and will also get a stomp attack on you for 3d10 plus 6 damage, and the gore attack is 4d8 plus 6 damage. Alright, so that is a look at the mechanical aspects of dinosaurs, or armored dinosaurs, throughout D&D. Now let's talk a little bit about using them in encounters. And of course, we talk about 5th edition, and Triceratops is the toughest of the armored dinosaurs in 5e, and that's a CR5 monster. So to create a hard encounter for a party of 5 PCs, we have the following level limits. At a party of level 3, a single Triceratops is a hard encounter. If the party level rises to 4, then it becomes a medium encounter. And so to bring it back up to a hard encounter, you can add a Hadrosaurus to the encounter. Now the Hadrosaurus hasn't appeared here, but it is another dinosaur, just not an armored dinosaur. And then at level 5, for a level 5 party, a single Triceratops is an easy encounter. And to make it a hard encounter, you can add a second Triceratops to the encounter. Maybe say it's a nesting pair or something. And that might be, if you have that kind of party, they might, after they kill Mama and Daddy, they might go looking for the eggs and see if they can take the eggs and potentially hatch them, love them, and pet them, and call them George. All right, tactics tactics for fighting against armored dinosaurs as players. Now, when you come up against an armored dinosaur, one of the things, if you're going to fight it, attack with numbers. Dinosaurs in D&D are primitive and unintelligent beasts, so they have a very predictable combat strategy. And you put your most heavily defended and high hit point character in the path of dinosaurs' chosen attack pattern, and have everyone else attack from other positions or from range. And watch out for the charge. Dinosaurs will flee when they are hurt badly enough, and the armored ones will run right through or over enemies. And with weights measured in tons, they'll trample anything in their path trying to get away. And if a 15-ton Triceratops stepped on you while it was trying to run away, it probably would hurt. I'm guessing that would smart a little bit. Okay, now if you're behind the DM screen, how might you use armored dinosaurs? So, in D&D, these armored dinosaurs are primarily herbivores, so they're not necessarily going to attack the party on sight. However, their presence may hint at the presence of much more fierce predator dinosaurs. So, you could kind of, give your party an idea that, oh, maybe there's some predators around, because they might be coming across more of these larger herbivorous dinosaurs, and that might mean, okay, we better watch out to see if there's some tracks of some of these like big huge T-Rex dinosaurs or something like that. Another thing that you can do is, or another thing to remember as a DM, is that armored dinosaurs are prone to attack when they feel threatened. So if you put a herd of these animals in the paths of the PCs, that could lead to an encounter if there's a reason the party cannot avoid going through them. So, if the party is like, okay, we don't want to, either because they've got rangers or druids or something like that, maybe they don't want to cause an attack with the dinosaurs or cause an encounter with the dinosaurs, so maybe they would go around. Or on the other hand, if they're out there trying to hunt these dinosaurs, well, they may want to go right through them, and if they get into a herd of them, you could have a stampede, and all of these charging dinosaurs could get in a few attacks that are going to make life a little bit difficult for your PCs. Okay, so where would we use them in campaigns as DMs? Now, in the Forgotten Realms, there's the whole area of Chult, which, like I said, that's the area where Tomb of Annihilation is set. And there are dinosaurs in that region. It's a jungle area. It's well south of the main Forgotten Realms city-states like Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate and all of those that you're familiar with. You're probably familiar with adventuring in over the last 2 or 3 editions of D&D. In that Chult area and in Hollow World, the presence of dinosaurs is a signal that the setting is not a standard fantasy setting. If you're using normal dinosaurs, it could be a signal there's a world out of time scenario where many natural eras coexist in the same place. Because yes, if your party, or at least the humans, are maybe from something that looks and sounds a lot like our idea of a medieval European civilization, then maybe in other parts of the world there's a different kind of civilization there, different kinds of people, and maybe they live side by side with prehistoric creatures like dinosaurs. And so that would be kind of an interesting way of using them. Also, you might use or create fantasy dinosaurs such as the Bloodstriker, and that shoots caustic blood out of its eyes at its attackers. It might be a sign there's a wizard who, like the paleobiologists in Jurassic Park, have engineered dinosaur creatures for some nefarious purpose. So that might be a thing where in your game world, normally, nobody is used to seeing dinosaurs. But maybe, just maybe in your game world, you have somebody, some arch wizard that lives out in a wizard tower somewhere that has a reputation and a power that's kind of like Hallister Blackcloak. And he or she, in your game world, may have actually started experimenting with these prehistoric creatures, finding ways of reanimating them, bringing them back to life, but then also modifying them and giving them some sort of magical, quasi-magical ability, fire breath, shooting poison from its eyes, whatever. So it's that type of thing could be very interesting to do in D&D. All right, here's some reskinning options. So they could prove to be interesting stat blocks to reskin for other armored creatures. So for a homebrew world, you might have creatures that are similar to elephants or buffalo that have armor on them. You could just take the armored dinosaur stat block and then say, oh, okay, no, this doesn't look like an Ankylosaurus. This looks like a buffalo, except that it has armor all over itself. Or this looks like an elephant, but it has armor all over itself. Maybe spikes on its tail, maybe a club-like tail, maybe armor plating running on its back, whatever. You could create a fantastical beast based on the Bloodstriker. It has some kind of magical or supernatural attack ability in addition to the defensive armor plating. And if you make beasts that can be raised and trained, you could create armored mounts like the Triceratops or the living siege engines like the Ankylosaurus. All right. Take a quick look over here and see if there are any questions at the moment in chat. I don't think there are. So I'm going to go ahead into the wrap up and then I'll check and see if we have any questions. All right. My name is DM Galabond and this has been Monster Monday for October 18th. Hope you've enjoyed our discussion and look at the armored dinosaurs through the history of the game, and maybe it's given you some ideas of how you could use these monsters. I don't know how often monsters like dinosaurs get used because I really don't know how many games, get into sort of prehistory meeting fantastical eras. And it feels like that's the kind of game you'd have to be running to have those, at least for me. Because, yes, I know magic and fantasy stuff, and I'm extremely hypocritical. I will sometimes pull the, well, how does this thing, if I get a question from a player, and say, well, how does this thing work and everything? I'll sometimes pull the, hey, it's fantasy. Deal with it. Don't worry about the mechanics of how it works. It's fantasy. Deal with it. And yet at the same time, there's a part of me that as a DM, when I'm setting up a particular game world, if it's a Renaissance or medieval sort of milieu, I feel really weird taking monsters like dinosaurs and putting them in there, while at the same time I have no problems putting things like dragons in there. So all of us are hypocrites in some way, where we will sort of scoff at people who won't suspend their disbelief for one thing, but then we kind of will do the same thing in other ways. So I've not ever thought of reasons to put dinosaurs in a setting where they wouldn't naturally fit. And it even feels a little bit jarring to me to have dinosaurs be part of the Chult area, if I'm being totally honest, in the Forgotten Realms. But hey, it's been that way ever since they announced Chult and since they added Chult as a part of that campaign setting. So, normally we have 3 other games here on this channel. Live streams, and all the live streams are with players playing in ongoing campaigns. On Sunday afternoons at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the Walker of Waterdeep campaign. That is actually on hiatus until the middle of November. It is because the way the season sports schedule was announced and set up, the team that I follow has back-to-back-to-back home matches on Sunday afternoons, starting this next week. So the 24th, there's a home match. The 31st, there's a home match. And then the last week of the season, on the 7th of November, we've got a match that will determine where we slot into the playoffs. So that is an important game that I want to be able to follow. All right, then on Thursday nights at 8 p.m., we meet up for the Sword Coast Chronicles. That is a 5th edition sort of love letter, if you will, to the published campaigns. Right now, we are in the Storm King's Thunder storyline, and they are on the trail of King Hecaton, a storm giant king who has been kidnapped. They're trying to figure out where he is, and one of them may have just figured out where he is, but the rest of them don't know it yet. And then on Saturday nights, we play a 2nd edition D&D game in the old world of Greyhawk, and that's a Saturday night Greyhawk campaign. Saturdays 7:30 p.m. and in that game we are playing through the original Temple of Elemental Evil, and that is that's a pretty cool campaign, or a pretty cool adventure that we're doing, and we've got some relatively new players to D&D, and we have some people who've been around for decades playing the game, and all of them are interested in exploring the rule sets of the old setting. So that's why I decided to go ahead and make it a 2nd edition game. All right, and then next week, when we come back for Monster Monday, we will be taking a look at the Ashen Rider. The Ashen Rider is one of those creatures that comes out of an alternate setting that came to D&D in 5th edition from another IP. So we'll talk about possible inspirations for that and possible ways it gives us hints at how we could reskin other monsters in our own homebrew D&D campaigns. Alright, let me go back and check to see if there are any questions. I don't think so. Alright, well, thank you all so much for coming and hanging out this evening. Certainly hope that you have enjoyed this Monster Monday. I have been DM Galabond. Once again, we've been talking about armored dinosaurs tonight, and as you head off for the rest of your week, I just want to remind you, as always, to watch out for the monsters under the bed. Good night, everybody.
rolls to overcome spell resistance, and you get 30 gold, 13 silver, and 50 copper to split up amongst yourselves.
Later, Barb.